Have you ever felt trapped by the past, as if the wounds left by your parents weigh so heavily on your heart that moving forward feels impossible? You're not alone. Many of us carry invisible scars from childhood, moments of neglect, misunderstanding, harsh words, or unmet expectations that silently shape our self-worth and relationships for years. But what if the key to freeing yourself lies not in blaming or forgetting, but in forgiveness? Not a shallow, "I'm fine now" kind of forgiveness, but a deep transformative forgiveness that Carl Jung described as essential for healing and reclaiming your life. Forgiveness is not about excusing what happened. It's about releasing the grip of pain that holds you hostage. It's about rewriting the narrative that has played out in your mind for decades. The narrative where your parents are villains, and you are the victim. What if you could change the story, not by erasing the past, but by understanding it through the lens of Jung's profound insights into the unconscious mind and the shadow? Today we will explore how to forgive your parents for past hurts using Carl Jung's timeless wisdom, helping you reclaim your power, peace, and the life you deserve. Forgiving our parents for past hurts is often one of the most difficult challenges we face in life, because the wounds inflicted in childhood are not just emotional, they are deeply intertwined with our sense of identity, safety, and belonging. From the earliest moments of life, our parents, or primary caregivers, represent the world's first experience of love and security. When that bond is fractured by neglect, criticism, rejection, or emotional absence, it shakes the very foundation upon which we build our self-esteem and trust. Unlike other relationships we may have as adults, the parent-child relationship is formative. It sets the stage for how we view ourselves and how will we expect to be treated by others. When the people who were supposed to nurture and protect us instead cause pain, the hurt often runs so deep that it creates invisible barriers inside us, shaping our emotional landscape in ways that we may not fully understand for many years. This pain often becomes a hidden wound, one that quietly influences our behaviors, reactions, and relationships long after childhood has passed. One of the reasons forgiveness is so challenging is because it feels like betraying our own pain. When we forgive, it can sometimes feel as if we are excusing or minimizing the very real suffering we endured. Our brains naturally resist this because forgiveness can seem like giving permission for the hurtful behavior to continue or dismissing the significance of our trauma. But forgiveness, as Carl Jung and many spiritual teachers emphasize, is not about forgetting or condoning the harm. Instead, it's about freeing ourselves from the grip of resentment, anger, and bitterness that weigh us down. Holding on to pain might feel like protecting ourselves, but in truth it often traps us in a cycle where we replay the old story of victimization over and over again. This cycle can keep us stuck, unable to move forward, because we are unconsciously tethered to the past through the unresolved emotions tied to it. Furthermore, the wounds inflicted by parents are often complicated by the paradox of love and hurt existing simultaneously. We want to love our parents, to be loved by them, and to be seen and accepted for who we are. But when their actions cause pain, it creates confusion. How do we reconcile the need for love with the experience of hurt? This conflict creates a tension inside us, a tension between loyalty to family and the need for self-protection. Often this tension manifests as guilt or shame, guilt for feeling anger or resentment toward our parents, and shame for believing there is something wrong with us because of their rejection or neglect. These emotions are heavy burdens that make forgiveness feel almost impossible, because forgiving seems to require us to let go of feelings that feel deeply justified. The difficulty of forgiveness is also linked to the unconscious patterns we develop as a response to our early experiences. Carl Jung's idea of the shadow explains how parts of ourselves, including feelings of anger, sadness, or inadequacy, are pushed out of conscious awareness because they are too painful or socially unacceptable. These shadow aspects do not disappear. They lurk beneath the surface, influencing how we react to people and situations in ways we may not fully understand. When we encounter triggers that remind us of our parents' past behaviors, our shadow reactions can cause us to respond with intense emotion, even if the current situation doesn't warrant it. This unconscious replay of old wounds keeps the pain alive and makes forgiveness feel elusive because we are not just forgiving isolated events. We are trying to untangle years of internalized hurt, fear, and mistrust. Moreover, our society often lacks guidance on how to process these complex emotions. We are taught to move on quickly, to get over it, or to forgive without truly understanding what forgiveness means or how to achieve it. This oversimplification invalidates the depth of our pain and can make us feel isolated in our struggle. Forgiveness is often portrayed as a moral obligation rather than a personal journey toward healing. This external pressure can lead to premature or surface-level forgiveness that leaves the core wounds unaddressed, causing us to carry unresolved feelings beneath a fragile veneer of peace. In addition, the fear of vulnerability plays a crucial role in the difficulty of forgiving. Forgiveness requires opening ourselves to feelings that are uncomfortable, painful, and sometimes terrifying. It demands that we face our shadows, confront the hurt, and acknowledge the parts of ourselves that have been wounded and perhaps neglected. For many, this level of emotional honesty feels unsafe or overwhelming. It is easier to stay in anger or resentment because these emotions create a sense of control, a way to protect ourselves from being hurt again. But this protective stance keeps us locked in the past and prevents the possibility of healing and transformation. Ultimately, the roots of our pain are complex and multi-layered. Forgiveness is hard because it asks us to do something profound, to reclaim our own power by releasing the hold that past wounds have over us. It calls us to confront the shadow parts of ourselves that have been shaped by those wounds, to embrace compassion, not only for our parents, but for ourselves, and to rewrite the narrative that has defined us for too long. This process is neither quick nor easy, but it is deeply freeing. Understanding why forgiveness is so hard is the first step toward unlocking the door to healing, peace, and a life where past hurts no longer dictate our future. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow offers profound insight into why forgiveness, especially of our parents, can feel so complicated and elusive. The shadow is that part of ourselves which we keep hidden, often unconsciously, because it contains feelings, desires, and memories we deem unacceptable or too painful to face. It is neither good nor bad. It simply exists as the unacknowledged or denied aspects of our personality. When it comes to forgiveness, the shadow plays a central role because it holds the very emotions and wounds we resist acknowledging, yet they govern so much of our behavior. For many of us, these shadow aspects include anger, resentment, fear, and even a deep-seated feeling of abandonment that was never fully processed in childhood. When our parents hurt us, whether intentionally or not, the resulting pain often sinks into this shadow realm, tucked away in parts of our psyche that don't always come into our conscious awareness. This hidden pain shapes our reactions, colors our relationships, and can create a persistent inner conflict that makes forgiveness feel like a distant, even impossible goal. The shadow doesn't just store our pain, it also protects us in a paradoxical way. By pushing painful memories and uncomfortable emotions out of our conscious mind, it shields us from being overwhelmed by feelings we might not be ready to handle. However, this protection comes at a cost. Because the shadow remains unconscious, its influence is subtle but powerful, causing us to react to situations based on old wounds rather than present reality. For example, you might find yourself feeling inexplicably angry or defensive around your parents or authority figures, even if no clear harm is happening in the moment. These reactions are often shadows of past pain resurfacing, a psychological echo of the hurts you endured as a child. This unconscious replay keeps the cycle of hurt alive and makes it extremely challenging to forgive, as you're not just forgiving one isolated event. You're grappling with a complex web of old emotions trapped in the shadow. Understanding the shadow means recognizing that forgiveness is not simply a matter of choosing to let go or move on. It's a much deeper, more intricate process that requires us to bring these unconscious elements into the light of awareness. Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Forgiveness, then, is an act of courage. It asks us to face the darkness within, to look honestly at the parts of ourselves we might have buried or denied because they were too painful to hold. This process requires us to stop blaming others and start examining how those early wounds have shaped our own identity and behavior. The shadow often contains not just our pain, but also the protective masks we've developed to survive that pain, such as anger used as armor, perfectionism born from fear of rejection, or emotional numbness created to avoid vulnerability. These survival mechanisms become part of our shadow selves and can keep us locked in patterns of suffering, including resistance to forgiveness. Bringing the shadow into consciousness helps us see that forgiveness is as much about forgiving ourselves as it is about forgiving our parents. We might hold shadow parts that have internalized blame, shame, or guilt for the past. Beliefs that say, "I was not worthy of love," or "I deserve the way I was treated." These self-directed shadows can be even harder to confront because they undermine our capacity for self-compassion. Yet, self-forgiveness is a crucial step toward true forgiveness of others. When we allow ourselves to feel and heal these shadow parts, we create space for empathy and understanding, not only for ourselves, but for the flawed human beings who raised us. This doesn't mean excusing hurtful behavior, but recognizing that our parents too carried their own shadows, unhealed wounds passed down through generations, often repeating patterns they never learned to break. Moreover, the shadow teaches us that forgiveness is not a linear process. It's messy, non-linear, and deeply personal. Sometimes the shadow will resist, bringing up old pain when we least expect it, making us question whether forgiveness is even possible. This resistance is part of the shadow's protective function, guarding us from rushing into forgiveness before we are truly ready. Instead of pushing away these feelings, Jung encourages us to befriend the shadow, to accept it as a part of our whole self. This acceptance allows healing to begin, because only when the shadow feels seen and understood can it soften its grip on our emotional lives. Ultimately, the role of the shadow in forgiveness is to remind us that healing is not about denying pain or rushing to erase it. It's about integrating all parts of ourselves, the light and the dark, into a more complete and authentic whole. Forgiveness emerges not from forgetting or excusing, but from a deep inner transformation, one that requires honesty, patience, and self-compassion. It is an invitation to rewrite our life story with awareness and choice, no longer driven by unconscious shadows, but guided by conscious understanding. When we embrace the shadow's role in forgiveness, we unlock the possibility of true freedom, a freedom that comes from releasing the past's hold and stepping into a future defined by peace and wholeness. When we begin the journey toward forgiving our parents, one of the most transformative steps is learning to see them through the lens of compassion. This shift is neither easy nor instantaneous. After all, the wounds they caused, whether through neglect, harsh words, unmet expectations, or absence, have often left us feeling deeply betrayed, angry, and vulnerable. It can feel almost impossible to soften these feelings and approach them with kindness. Yet, compassion doesn't mean excusing or forgetting the pain. Instead, it invites us to hold the complexity of human experience, that our parents, like all of us, are flawed beings doing the best they could with what they had. This perspective can open a door to healing that blame and resentment keep firmly shut. Compassion allows us to move beyond judgment, not by erasing the past, but by understanding the context in which their actions, hurtful as they were, occurred. At the core of this compassionate view is recognizing that our parents were also shaped by their own shadows. They carried wounds, fears, and unresolved pain from their childhoods and lives before we ever entered the picture. Yet the patterns of hurt we experienced were repeated cycles, passed down from generation to generation, because they never learned healthier ways to cope or love. Seeing this doesn't diminish the reality of what we endured, but it helps us realize that their actions were not simply bad or cruel choices. Often they were the survival strategies they developed to navigate their own struggles, just as we have developed ours. This recognition allows us to see them as people caught in their own battles, often limited by their emotional tools and life experiences. Understanding this can evoke empathy, which is the seed from which forgiveness grows. Compassion also requires us to acknowledge the immense pressure and responsibility parents face. Parenting is a deeply difficult task, often without a clear manual or training. Many parents carry the weight of societal expectations, personal sacrifices, and their own unmet needs while trying to raise children. In many cases, they were navigating their own pain while trying to provide a better life for us, even if their efforts sometimes missed the mark. This is not to justify harmful behavior, but to highlight the complexity behind it. When we hold this broader picture in mind, it can soften the sharp edges of our anger and open the way for more balanced emotions, ones that include both sadness for what was lost and appreciation for what was attempted. Viewing our parents with compassion does not mean we have to reconcile with them immediately or maintain a close relationship if it is unsafe or unhealthy. Forgiveness is ultimately an internal process. It is about freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying unresolved pain and resentment. This release benefits us first and foremost, because holding on to anger often hurts us more than anyone else. It keeps us tethered to the past, replaying stories of pain and injustice that prevent us from fully living in the present. Compassion for our parents can be a powerful tool in loosening these bonds. It allows us to hold their humanity alongside our own suffering, creating space for healing within ourselves. Moreover, compassion invites us to reflect on our own imperfections and the ways we might have inherited some of these patterns. It encourages humility, a reminder that none of us are perfect parents, children, or human beings. In this light, forgiveness becomes a shared human experience rather than a one-sided act. When we embrace this shared humanity, it becomes easier to let go of rigid expectations and open our hearts to the complexities of family dynamics. This does not erase the hurt, but places it within a larger story, one that includes struggle, growth, and the potential for transformation. Practically, cultivating compassion might involve exercises like journaling from your parents' perspective, imagining their struggles and fears, or simply acknowledging the parts of their lives you don't know but that shape their behavior. It can also involve setting compassionate boundaries, recognizing what you need to heal and protect yourself while still holding kindness toward your parents' humanity. Meditation and mindfulness practices can deepen this compassion, helping us move from reactive emotions to thoughtful presence, where understanding can flourish even amid pain. Ultimately, seeing your parents through the lens of compassion is a radical act of empathy that paves the way for true forgiveness. It frees you from the prison of past hurts by reminding you that your parents, like you, are imperfect souls navigating their own journey. This perspective does not erase your story but enriches it, allowing you to integrate pain and love, shadow and light, into a fuller understanding of your family and yourself. When compassion becomes part of your forgiveness process, it transforms not only your relationship with your parents, but also your capacity to relate to yourself and others with greater kindness and grace. Forgiveness is a process, not a single act. Here are practical steps inspired by Jungian psychology to guide your journey. First, acknowledge the hurt. Start by honestly naming what hurt you and how it affected you. Journaling or talking with a trusted person can help. Next, identify your shadow reactions. Notice when old feelings arise. Are you defensive, angry, withdrawn? These reactions often signal your shadow being triggered. Practice self-compassion. Understand that your feelings are valid. You're not weak for being hurt. You're human. Reframe your parents' story. Imagine their childhood, their struggles, their limitations. This doesn't erase your pain, but adds depth to your understanding. Set boundaries. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting ongoing harm. Protect your well-being by establishing clear boundaries if needed. If it feels safe, engage in dialogue. Share your feelings with your parents. Sometimes, this can open doors to mutual healing. Finally, create a new narrative. Begin to rewrite your life story with yourself as the author, empowered, whole, and free. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as a simple act of letting go or forgetting what was done to us. But its true power lies far deeper, in its ability to heal wounds that run through the core of our being. When we forgive, especially our parents for past hurts, we are not just changing the story between them and us. We are transforming ourselves in profound and lasting ways. The act of forgiveness is a bridge that leads us from suffering to freedom, from bitterness to peace. It opens the door to a healing that goes beyond surface-level relief and reaches into the emotional, mental, and even physical layers of our health. This power of forgiveness is both a gift we give to others and, more importantly, a gift we give to ourselves. The journey toward forgiveness begins with the recognition that carrying anger, resentment, or pain is like holding a heavy burden that weighs down our spirit. These emotions keep us tethered to the past, replaying old wounds over and over, sometimes unconsciously. When we forgive, we begin to lighten this load. We choose to stop feeding the pain with our thoughts and reactions. Instead, forgiveness allows us to release the grip these memories have on us, creating space for healing and growth. It doesn't mean we erase what happened or pretend it didn't hurt. Rather, it means we refuse to let those painful moments define us or imprison us in a cycle of suffering. Forgiveness also has remarkable effects on our mental and physical well-being. Studies have shown that people who practice forgiveness often experience lower stress levels, reduced anxiety, and improved heart health. The emotional release that forgiveness provides helps to calm the nervous system, decreasing chronic tension and the wear and tear on the body caused by prolonged anger or bitterness. This mind-body connection highlights that forgiveness is not just an abstract ideal, but a practical tool for holistic healing. By forgiving our parents, we may also find ourselves healing parts of our own psyche that have been wounded by this pain. The parts that carry shame, fear, or self-doubt rooted in those early relationships. On a psychological level, forgiveness helps us reclaim our personal power. When we hold on to resentment, it often feels like our parents or the past have control over our emotions and our present life. Forgiveness is the act of taking back that power. It is saying, I am no longer defined by what was done to me. It allows us to step out of victimhood and into agency, where we can make conscious choices about how we live and who we want to become. This shift from being a passive recipe. In embracing forgiveness, we honor not only our own healing, but also the complex humanity of our parents and ourselves. It is a profound act of self-care and courage, the decision to let go of old wounds and open ourselves to a future not defined by pain, but by peace, growth, and love. The healing power of forgiveness is a gift waiting for us all, a path that leads from the shadows of hurt into the light of wholeness. Forgiving your parents for past hurts is not a betrayal of your pain. It is an act of courage and self-love. Carl Jung's wisdom reminds us that beneath the surface of every hurt lies an opportunity for transformation. Your parents' shadows do not have to define your light. You have the power to step off the old script and write your own story, one of healing, compassion, and freedom. Remember, forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, embrace your shadow with kindness, and trust that in doing so, you reclaim not only your past, but your future. You are not alone. Your story matters, and forgiveness is the key to unlocking the life you were always meant to live.